Okay, hello everyone. This is your pre-recorded lecture for percussion methods for Thursday, August 31st, since I'm out of town. So we're going to review some of the stuff we talked about last time and go a little bit further with the roll types and just generally make some more progress in our snare drum knowledge and go deeper with some of the concepts. Okay, so one thing I just want to make sure, obviously we've talked about this kind of in every class on some level, but every time we're getting to the drum or to the pad, I want to make sure we're using good technique. So just review, right? We want to think about having, the thumb parallel with the stick. I'm figuring out what's easiest to do on the camera. The thumb parallel with the stick, the index finger wrapped around. I feel dumb. And the other fingers like that. Okay. So if you hold your wrist up and look at it, it should look like this. Okay. Make sure we're matching the hands. Okay. Every time you get to the drum, I want to make sure that you're doing these things. Okay. It's easy to get lazy with technique, after we learn the basics, but let's make sure we keep it up all semester and beyond. Okay, so we started talking a little bit about roll types last class. And one thing I want to bring your attention to that I added to Blackboard, I added a new section that says handouts. Right now there's only one handout in it. You can check it out. It's a PDF. It should look like this. It's the Percussive Art Society International Drum Rudiments. It's 2 pages. I did mine double-sided. Okay, so in percussion and specifically in sort of snare drum playing, we have all these different little patterns that we call rudiments. And they're sort of seen as some of the building blocks for playing the snare drum. We've briefly touched on these. I think in the past they maybe been overemphasized in some pedagogical approaches with playing percussion, but they are important to be aware of, and some in particular we're going to take a look at. And the reason why I want to take a look at it today, a few reasons, but A is because all of the different roll types that we mentioned last time and that we're going to dig into a little bit more today are on this. Okay, so if you don't already have this PDF pulled up, it might be helpful to do it now. I'm grabbing a pencil for my own use. Okay, so first thing I want you to take a look at, if you want to pause the video for a second to grab it, do that. Okay, the first thing I want you to take a look at is there's sort of a bunch of different categories. So there's these big categories that are numbered. So number 1 is roll rudiments. Number 2 is diddle rudiments. And then on the back or on the second page, we have flam rudiments and drag rudiments. So there's kind of 4 big categories. You'll see there's a total of 40. To get super nerdy for a second, basically way back in the day, there was just the 13 original rudiments, and then we have the 26 standard American rudiments, and then at some point PAS expanded it to 40. The 26 are still kind of the standard, and those are all indicated with asterisk. Don't worry, you're not going to be expected to know all 40 of these. That's kind of ridiculous, and that's why I got out a pencil, because I'm going to mark the ones on my sheet that we're going to talk about, at least for now. Okay, so let's go back to the beginning, right? Big heading 1 is roll rudiments, and then within that there's a subheading of A, B, C, right? Yes, A, B, C that are labeled as single stroke roll rudiments, multiple bounce roll rudiments, and double stroke or open roll rudiments. Okay, and those are sort of the 3 different types of rolls that we mentioned. So single stroke, if you remember, this is just number 1. So go ahead and give that a circle. We're not going to deal with this too much for snare drum because, as you might remember, it's not super relevant to snare drum. But this is the type of roll that we're going to do a lot later on in the class, especially when we're talking about timpani and when we're talking about keyboard percussion, such as marimba. Okay, so the idea of a single stroke roll is just that you're alternating your hands, you're alternating your sticks very quickly. Okay, and I'll demonstrate some of these on the pad in a second. Okay, so we can skip number 2, number 3. Let's go down to subheading B, multiple bounce roll rudiments. Okay, so the thing we're looking at here is just number 4 that says multiple bounce roll. Another word for this is a buzz roll. You've maybe heard that term before. And this is going to be the most common roll we're dealing with on the snare drum, and in particular in pretty much any concert band setting. This is the type of roll we're going to use. It's notated a few different ways. Here you'll see a Z, right, through that, and this is number 4. You'll see a Z through the stem. It's kind of interesting because that is one common way to notate this. However, I would say it's much more common in sort of more music educational, pedagogical music, like again your beginning band book, or your grade 1, grade 2, grade 3 band literature. You'll a lot of times see the Z to indicate a buzz roll. I would say as you go further along, it's less and less common to see notated like that, and we'll talk a little bit about the different kinds of notations for rolls because they can be a bit confusing. Okay, and then you don't need to look at number 5 right now, the triple stroke roll. We can skip that. It's not relevant to us. And then go to number 6, the double stroke open roll. Okay, and this is the roll that basically for every time we move our hand, we're doing 2 strokes. So right, right, left, left, right, right, left, left, right, right, left, left, right, right, left, left. And the main application of this is marching band or rudimental snare drum, which comes from the marching band tradition. Okay. You'll see under the subcategory C for double stroke open roll rudiments, we have like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So from 6 all the way up to 15, those are different kinds of double stroke rolls. But if you really start to take a look at them, all it is actually categorizing or sort of codifying different different durational values for different rolls. So the 5-stroke roll is essentially an 8th note roll with a release. The 6-stroke is kind of confusing. Let's skip that. But if you skip ahead to number 10, the 9-stroke roll is a quarter note double stroke roll. It lasts for a quarter note and then we release. Okay, and you'll see down at the very bottom, the 17-stroke roll is a half note in durational value that then ends with the release. So the way that number is calculated for these 5-stroke, 7-stroke, 9-stroke, 15-stroke, whatever, all of these, essentially how it's calculated, a few of them are weird, but for the majority of them, if you see a 5-stroke roll, think about how many 16th notes go into that 8th note, right? So we have 2 16th notes in that 8th note, and each of those 16th notes is getting a double stroke, right, right, left, left. So now we have 4 strokes, and then the release on the and is the 5th stroke. Okay, I don't know what I'm doing on 2 different hands, but so we have right, right, left, left, right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that makes up the 5-stroke roll. If that's a little bit confusing right now, we're going to go over this again in class next week when I'm back. Similarly, if you go down to the 9-stroke roll, okay, that's a quarter note duration for the roll with the release. So that's why there's always an odd number on most of these, because it's right, right, left, left, right, right, left, left, and then release on the right hand. Okay, so we have 4 16th notes make up a quarter note. Each of those 16th notes get a double stroke, so we have 8 strokes all of a sudden, and then the 9th stroke is the release. So 9-stroke roll, etc. Again, if that's a little bit wacky, we'll talk more about it. Okay, so I'm going to get up now and play a little bit, and I'm going to need to adjust my computer and maybe the levels. Okay, so I'll just demonstrate let me move my computer a little bit closer. Let's see, a little bit better. Okay, so I just want to demonstrate a single stroke roll really quick. This is number 1. Okay, right? I'm going to turn the gain down a little. Single stroke roll. all we're doing is going back and forth between right and left hand, but we're going quickly enough that it starts to sound like it's sustaining. Again, on something like a snare drum, right? It's a very dry, short sound. Even on a real drum, right? I'm playing on a pad, but even on a real drum, it's a pretty dry, short sound. So we never use this roll on the snare drum, really. It's for timpani, for marimba, etc. Maybe for concert toms. Okay, the buzz roll sounds like this. Again, we call this the buzz roll or the multiple bounce roll. And we're going to dig into this in a second. And then last but not least is the double stroke roll. So for every time I move my arm or my wrist, I'm playing 2 strokes, okay? Okay, so for example, a 5-stroke roll is going to sound like this. I'll do a few in a row. It's a 5-stroke roll. A 9-stroke roll is going to sound like this. Okay, and a 17-stroke roll is 1 yen, 2 yen, 3. 1 yen, 2 yen, 3. Okay, I think that makes sense. So what am I actually doing to achieve the buzz? Okay, this is a tricky concept, and it'll take us a few attempts to kind of go over it. Okay, so we've talked so far about using our wrists a lot when we're playing percussion, right, and keeping our fingers on the stick. So I don't want to confuse you since we're just a couple of weeks into playing snare drum, but one thing I will say is typically when you play a roll, it changes what you do with your technique a little bit. The thing that students want to do is they want to squeeze a lot right here because that immediately does help you to get a buzz. However, I would say we really need to avoid that happening because it creates a lot of tension and ultimately actually makes it hard to have a good buzz roll. So that's essentially bad technique, is to squeeze really hard with just our thumb and index finger. It's very common. I see basically... Okay, so you can kind of hear that I am making a buzzing sound, but it's not a very good buzzy sound. It's not very sustained. There's a lot of tension, which is ultimately bad for my body and bad for the sound that's going to result. And it's actually very hard to sustain that because you're not relaxed. So, for example, if a student needs to play a particularly long buzz roll, they're going to probably have a problem doing that because they're going to be too tense and they're going to basically get too tired. Okay, so the thing that you can practice doing right away is you want to keep these 3 fingers on, okay? So our fulcrum, right? Thumb, index finger, middle finger. And we can take off our ring and pinky finger just a little bit. And all we're doing, we don't need to pinch really. We're just holding the stick directly above the drum head and letting it bounce, okay? So instead of doing our full rebound stroke, letting it come back up, or doing a down stroke where we catch it right above the drum, we're actually just letting the stick bounce directly on the head. So when I'm doing rolls, I'm actually moving my arms, okay? So it's not just wrist anymore, and that's why when I kind of introduced the concept of we're just using wrist, that's true for a lot of drumming, but when we're doing rolls, it's okay to start incorporating our arm. But you can do the same thing with just your wrist. So what I want you to do, if you don't have your pad out already, please get it now. Okay, you have your pad now. So I want you to practice just doing one hand and keep a steady, slow beat, but don't let the stick bounce up. When you move, keep your hand here. Okay? And you can experiment with sort of different ways of catching the rebound. If you choke it too much, then it's not going to bounce at all, right? And then it's just a dead stroke, and we don't want that. So try to be as relaxed as possible. Don't grip the stick too tight. And just move your arm or your wrist up and down and catch the stick right above the head and let it bounce or dribble just a little bit. So you'll see that most of the bouncing, right, is happening very close to the head because essentially I'm catching it right above but holding it there so it bounces several times. This is a learned skill that develops over a long period of time. If you've been doing this for 3 minutes and you're feeling frustrated because you're not getting a bouncy sound, that's okay. It's going to take a little while. Okay. I want you to notice that the first step I take to make a good buzz roll has nothing to do with speed, has nothing to do with, trying to play as fast as possible, and I'm not even using both arms yet. Okay, again, I can't tell you how many times I've seen students try to do this. Chaotic, fast, tense playing as soon as they see a roll. And eventually we do need to play quickly for the roll to sound good. But the first step is always just isolating one hand and learning to buzz. Okay, and you can start with your dominant hand, so your right hand for most folks. And eventually, when you start to feel like you're hearing a little bit of a buzz, what I would recommend is then doing just some left hand strokes. Okay, and then after you've done that for a while, we can go back and forth, but we're still going nice and slow, right? Essentially, the rhythmic pattern under this is just like slow quarter notes. But I'm letting each stroke bounce or dribble on the head. So yes, eventually I went right, a much quicker motion to achieve the roll, but to build up to there, this is what I want to do. So one exercise you can do, you get the right hands going, then the left hands. When you start to hear a little dribble, then you can set your metronome to quarter notes. I don't know, this isn't particularly fast. Maybe it's 80 beats per minute or something. Maybe that's off. Playing quarter notes. Right, so I'm still thinking about there being an underlying rhythm to what I'm doing, and this is something we're going to talk about a lot. Still thinking about there being an underlying rhythm to what I'm doing with the roll. Okay. But instead of it being quarter like this, it's buzz, 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 buzz. And the exercise is turn it on to quarter notes, do a measure of quarter notes, measure of 8 notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and do that for a few minutes. Okay, if you're like, I've got this, you're feeling fancy, we can do 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4, triple it, triple it, triple it, triple it. Okay. So the thing we're going to talk about a lot is what we call the roll skeleton, which is a fancy way of saying the underlying rhythm behind the roll that we're doing. Okay. So we're not talking too much about double stroke rolls yet. We will talk a little bit more about them later. But one thing that's helpful is with all the different double stroke rudiments that we talked about a few minutes ago, the 5-stroke roll, the 7-stroke roll, the 9-stroke, 17-stroke, etc., etc. Right? It breaks it down into exactly how many strokes, and those are related to the durational values. So when we're doing buzz rolls, we don't really quantify it in such a precise way. But we can actually think of it in a pretty similar way, in the sense that if I'm doing, if I need to do a buzz roll for a quarter note, what we would call a 9-stroke roll as a rudimental roll. If I'm doing a buzz roll, I can actually typically think of like, I probably need 4 16th notes in that quarter note to make it sound like a buzz roll. So I'm essentially just playing 1 E and a 2. But it's buzz, 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 2. So buzz, 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 2. 1 E and 2, but if it was a buzz roll, buzz, 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 2. Okay. We'll talk more about roll skeletons and what we do to figure out what the roll skeleton should be. But a good rule of thumb for a lot of, I think for a lot of band music in particular, that's in kind of a certain tempo range, is a 16th note underlying pulse of our rolls is a good starting point. Obviously, if the music's really fast, that can start to become a problem. If the music's really slow, that could be a problem too. So we can talk about how to determine what to do when. Okay, so there's kind of intro to buzz strokes, buzz rolls. You need to spend some time working on this, practicing it. It's a tricky thing to do. Okay, I'm going to sit down again. And I'll talk through a couple more rudiments that we need to start thinking about. Get some water. Throwing a lot at you today. Okay, so go ahead and go to page 2. We can skip the diddle rudiments for now, although we've already talked about number 16, the single paradiddle, a little bit. Okay, but you can see those are the single paradiddle, double paradiddle, triple paradiddle, single paradiddle, diddle. Great. So let's turn to page number 2. Okay. Go ahead and look at the very first one. Is called a flam, and this whole category is flam rudiments. So number 20 is just a single flam, and this might look familiar to you because it looks quite similar to a grace note on most instruments. Okay, so if you know what a grace note is on your instrument, you probably have a pretty good idea of what a flam is. A flam is our fancy percussion name for a grace note, but we need to talk exactly about how to execute it because there's a certain method. All of the rudiments from 20 down to 30 are flam rudiments, which means they incorporate flams somewhere in these rhythmic patterns. Okay, so number 20, just the single flam, is just playing quarter notes that are flams, but then you'll see, the flam accent is a flam left, right, flam right, left, flam left, right, flam right, left. So there's just different combinations of flams and sticking patterns, and these make up the flam rudiments. Like I said, fun names: flamacue, flam paradiddle, single flammed mill, flam paradiddle diddle, pataflafla, Swiss Army triplet. So some fun ones. Okay. The other column on the right hand side under big Roman numeral 4 is the drag rudiments. Okay. Another word you can use is rough. And when I say rough, it's R-U-F-F. I guess that's the spelling of a dog barking rough, not R-O-U-G-H. Okay, so a drag or rough. Let's use the term drag for now, but you might hear people use the term rough as well. Okay, so if you look at number 31, the first one in the drag rudiments category, it's just a single drag. Okay, and you'll see that it looks quite similar to the column on the left for the flam. In fact, it looks almost identical. The main difference is that you'll see there's 2 little grace notes that are on the same hand. So left, left, and then a primary note on the right hand. And then for the next one, it's the opposite. So 2 little grace notes on the right hand and a left hand as the primary note. Okay, so the flam and the drag are very related. They're basically the same thing. It's just one is a simpler version and one's a little more complicated. Just in terms of there being 1 grace note versus 2 grace notes. Then there are several drag rudiments. They do not necessarily correspond to, like you might think going down, because there's kind of the same number, that they would be essentially the same on each side, but just like a drag version of the flam ones. But they're not. They're for the most part pretty much totally different for whatever reason. Hopefully that made sense. Made sense in my head. Okay, so I want to talk through the flam setup. The flam setup and how to execute that. Okay, so we're going to go back to the drum for a second. Okay, so I find even with some advanced high schoolers that oftentimes the basics of how to execute a flam are not either taught to them, or it didn't take. I'm not sure. I know music educators are trying their best to convey all the right information to all the students, and sometimes it's hard to do it. But I think if you can set the students up for success with flams right away, it can make things easier later on. Okay, so first of all, I'll just demonstrate one. Okay, that is a single flam. And if I were to do several in a row, that's what I'm going to look like. I just did all right-handed flams. The way this rudiment is written on this piece of paper and is often written is alternating flams. And, we'll talk a little bit about that in a second, but alternating would look like this. Flam, 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 flam. Okay, so oftentimes what I see when students need to do flams is like they pretty much try to do something like that, where their sticks are doing all sorts of crazy things. So I like to set up by doing this. Okay, start with a right-handed flam. So our right stick is in basically the same position as when we do rebound stroke exercises, right? So when we're doing our warm-up sticking exercises, that's where our right hand starts and stops. Same thing for a flam, okay? So it should be ready to do a full rebound stroke. Our left hand is very close to the drum. What kind of strokes start very close to the drum? An upstroke and a tap. Very good, everyone. Okay, so upstrokes and taps start very close to the drum. So this is where the stroke types start to make some more sense, hopefully. So if I'm just doing one flam, what I'm doing is my hands are set up with my right hand ready to do a rebound stroke and my left hand ready to do a tap. If you just want to think about that in simpler terms, our right hand is much further away from the drum or the pad. The left hand is very close. It's like less than half an inch, or maybe it's a half inch. Okay, it's not here. It's not here. It's here. It's really close to the drum. Okay, again, this is not a good setup for a flam. This is, I know you might not be able to see as well because it's a video, but this is like 5 inches. This is like a couple inches. This is getting better, but really we want to be very close to the drum. Okay, and even if the right hand is, just starting from here or here, the left hand is always really close to the drum. So we might play a flam from up here, or we might play from there, depending on dynamics, which we'll get into soon. But the left hand always needs to be very close. Okay, and essentially, part of the point of this setup is you don't need to think about going left-right. You can think about your hands actually starting to move at the same time, but because the left hand is so much closer, it hits the drum first, okay? So 1, 2, 3, 4. You can think about it again. The hands moving at the same time. 1, 2, 3, 4. But the left hand is very close to the drum, so it's going to hit first. Okay? So try getting set up. Okay? So left hand close, right hand far. Go ahead and do that. 1, 2, ready, go, flam. Okay, and now I want you to do 2 in a row. 1, 2, ready, go, 1, 2. So the right hand should do 2 full rebound strokes, right? Start up, end up. The left hand should do 2 taps, start low, end low. Cool. Okay, now I want to try an alternating flam, and that's what's actually written on the flam rudiment sheet that you have. So you'll see there's a little L under the small note, and there's a bigger R under the quarter note. And then for the next one, it's flip-flopped, right? So there's a little R under the grace note, there's a big L under the main note or the quarter note. Okay, so kind of in slow motion, I'm doing a left hand, I messed that up already. I'm having the left hand stay close and the right hand be far to start. But they have to switch. Okay, so let's talk about those stroke types. And if I'm to repeat this, it's going to look like this. These are alternating flams. So right hand, left hand, right hand, left hand. And I'm referring to which stick is the high stick when I'm saying right hand, left hand. Okay, So left hand really close, right hand further away. This is when we need an upstroke with our left hand, okay? And this is when we need a right stroke with a downstroke with our right hand. So I'm doing a downstroke with the right hand. I'm doing an upstroke with the left hand. And that means I'm now set up to do the left-handed flam, okay? So just one hand at a time. The right hand is doing a downstroke. The left hand is doing an upstroke. And now I'm prepared to do a left-handed flam. So do it again. So this is back to the left-handed setup. Left hand does a downstroke, right hand does an upstroke, and now I'm ready to do a right hand flam again. Okay, so right hand flam, left hand flam. You can think of it as each hand is doing downstroke, upstroke, downstroke, upstroke, but they're offset. Upstroke, downstroke, upstroke, downstroke. Several in a row. Okay, it's gonna feel a little tricky. You probably can't do like 10 flams in a row and make them all be good and consistent like I just did. If you did, great. You're a superstar. You're ready to be a professional percussionist. Okay, so go ahead and try some of that. Pause here and try a few of those. Okay, great. You've successfully played lots of flams. You're awesome. We're going to leave drags or roughs for the next class. But just know it's going to be a very similar setup. But we're essentially going to be playing multiple grace notes for each of those instead. Okay, I'm going to keep this class a little bit short since you're watching online. I'm just navigating to Blackboard really quick. Okay, so you saw an announcement, hopefully, that I want you to do a video assignment due on Friday. It's very short. Okay, you just need to record. Shoot, sorry, I'm having a hard time getting. My percussion methods open. Okay, sorry. Regardless, video assignment instructions are up on Blackboard. It is number 13 from page 13 from your book, which I have somewhere. But of course I don't have on me. Okay, hold on one second. PDFs on my other computer. Okay, so yes, we have number 13 from page 13. I just want you to record that and submit it on Blackboard via assignment. And remember to make sure the stickings are correct and as written. Okay, and I'm going to play through this once. Hopefully I don't mess it up, because I'm a pro. Okay, and that way I can be helpful. Okay, this video, it's nice to be able to see your nice faces, but when you're doing your video, but the important thing is I can see your hands and the drum and the pad, or the pad. You don't necessarily have a drum. Okay. So this is a pretty good video. Okay, please don't do a video where you're like over here and I can't see what you're playing, or it's just pointed at your face and I can't see your hands. Okay, so number 13. that's all I need you to do. Just real simple. I will say that measure 2 of the last line has this paradiddle, and I've kind of said before that those are silly because he's just doing it as to do it. You would never actually play it that way. But for the purposes of this assignment, go ahead and play the paradiddle sticking as written just so you can practice it. That's all I have for now. I'll be in touch with you guys more via Blackboard about next week. Hope you have a good weekend, and feel free to email me if you have any questions. Thanks. Bye.